On the evening of the 19th of August 2004, 22-year-old Amélie Delagrange met several French friends for drinks at Crystal's Wine Bar in Twickenham. She had moved to London only a few months earlier, hoping to improve her English while working at a bakery in Richmond. Her family remembered her as happy, intelligent and cautious, and she was already considering extending her stay in Britain. At around 8:30 p.m, Amélie called her boyfriend, Olivier L'Enfant, and invited him to join the group. He was busy moving house and declined, but they agreed to meet the following day. Amélie assured him that she would not be home late. Shortly after 9:30, CCTV captured her boarding a number 267 bus outside the Old Post Sorting House pub on London Road. It was a journey she had taken before, but that night Amélie missed her usual stop. The bus continued until she got off in Fulwell, leaving her further from home than she had intended. Realising her mistake, she began walking back through the dark towards Twickenham Green. While Amélie tried to find her way home, Levi Bellfield was driving through the same streets in a Ford Courier van. Bellfield was a former pub bouncer and wheel clamper who spent long periods driving around southwest London. Investigators would eventually establish that he repeatedly watched women around bus routes and bus stops, sometimes approaching them from his vehicle. He knew the local streets, the quiet corners, and the places where someone leaving a late bus might suddenly find herself alone. CCTV showed Bellfield's van moving around Twickenham before Amélie reached the Green. Amélie was last seen alive at around 10 p.m. walking by herself. One local resident later recalled hearing a woman's voice and a brief scream coming from the darkness. At approximately 10:30, a student found Amélie lying face down near the cricket square on Twickenham Green. She had suffered severe head injuries. The student placed her in the recovery position and ran to find help. But Amélie's time on this earth ended in hospital shortly after midnight. Her handbag, telephones, purse and keys were missing. The route Bellfield took afterwards contained a gap of approximately 26 minutes. Prosecutors argued that he used that time to drive to Walton Bridge and dispose of Amélie's belongings in the River Thames. Divers later recovered several of the items from the water. Telephone records, CCTV and the movements of his van helped place him in the area surrounding Amélie's final journey. The attack was not examined in isolation. 18 months earlier, 19-year-old Marsha McDonnell had been attacked close to her home in Hampton, shortly after stepping off the number 111 bus. In May 2004, 18-year-old Kate Sheedy had also just left a London bus when Bellfield deliberately drove into her. Kate survived and later gave evidence against him. Those cases revealed the importance of the bus network to Bellfield's pattern. He did not simply choose random London streets. He watched routes, followed passengers and looked for young women, becoming separated from the safety of a crowded bus. Bellfield was eventually convicted of Amélie and Marsha's murder, as well as the attempted murder of Kate. He was later convicted of ending Millie Dowler and received whole life prison sentences. Millie's story was the first ever case I covered on this channel 4 years ago. It's one of those stories that stayed with me since it first showed up in the news, and it's still there nearly 25 years later. On the evening of the 29th of July 2005, 28-year-old Richard Whelan met his girlfriend, Kerry Barker, for drinks at the Agricultural Pub in North London. It was an ordinary Friday night. Afterward, they ran to catch the number 43 bus on Holloway Road and took seats on the upper deck. At almost the same moment, another passenger boarded, carrying a bag of chips. His name was Anthony Joseph, although he was also known as Anthony Pert. He had travelled to London from Manchester only hours earlier, following a release that should never have happened. Joseph had originally been arrested over a burglary in May. While on bail, he was detained again in connection with separate allegations and sent to the Forest Bank Young Offender Institution. The later charges were dropped, but an outstanding warrant remained active because he had missed a court appearance in the burglary case. Staff at Forest Bank did not have the correct information. At 1:45 that afternoon, Joseph was released. By around 10 p.m, he was sitting near the back of the bus's upper deck. He had consumed alcohol and other substances and was carrying a sharp implement. He began throwing chips at an American woman seated nearby, laughing as he did it. Uncomfortable with the behavior, she moved away. Joseph then began targeting Kerry. One of the chips struck the back of her head. Other passengers chose to go downstairs rather than become involved. Richard did not. Usually described as quiet and private, he stood and asked Joseph to stop. The confrontation lasted no more than 30 seconds. Joseph became verbally and physically aggressive. Kerry tried to pull him away from Richard while repeatedly pressing the bell and screaming for him to stop. During the struggle, Richard was struck 7 times across his thigh, back and torso, including once through the heart. Joseph ran downstairs and left the bus on Holloway Road. Witnesses remembered what appeared to be a smile or smirk on his face as he walked away. Richard initially tried to follow him. CCTV showed him making his way down the stairs while holding his chest, but his strength quickly failed. He collapsed and never regained consciousness. His time on this earth ended at Whittington Hospital, only hours after a peaceful evening had begun. The tragedy was made worse by the knowledge that Joseph should still have been in custody. A warrant had existed for his arrest, yet communication failures between police, courts and the prison meant that the information did not reach the people responsible for his release. One computer system had not been updated. Different agencies in different parts of the country had failed to connect the cases. Joseph later admitted manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility after 2 juries failed to reach a verdict on murder. He had paranoid schizophrenia and was sent indefinitely to Broadmoor Secure Hospital. An official inquiry strongly criticised the criminal justice system's handling of bail conditions, outstanding warrants and communication between agencies. The report described parts of the process as lackadaisical and nonchalant, while recommending greater access to criminal records and closer cooperation between prisons, police, probation and the courts. None of those reforms could change what happened on the upper deck. Richard had intervened because a stranger was throwing chips at women. The judge later called his reaction understandable and praiseworthy. He made a simple decision to protect someone else. And my question to you is, would you have stood up and intervened? Would you walk away? Or would you just pretend it wasn't happening? Every day, millions of people step onto London buses and place a kind of automatic trust in the person behind the wheel. The driver controls a large vehicle through crowded streets, carries children, commuters and elderly passengers, and comes into contact with thousands of strangers over the course of a career. Most people never think twice about who is sitting in that cab. For years, Keith Betson was one of those drivers. He worked for Transport for London and lived in Chessington with his Hungarian-born wife, Ildiko Betson. She was 25 years younger than Keith, and people close to the couple said that she once idolized her husband and would do almost anything for him. By 2019, however, the relationship had begun to change. Ildiko reported a physical confrontation to police, but later withdrew the complaint. Their daughter had pointed out that Keith was the family's main source of income, placing Ildiko in the difficult position of depending financially upon the same man she had reported. The following year, Keith reversed a bus into something while working. He left his job in June 2020 before he could be dismissed. Almost immediately, the structure surrounding the couple disappeared. Keith was no longer working. The country was moving through pandemic restrictions, and he and Ildiko were spending far more time together inside their home. Both began drinking heavily. Arguments became frequent enough for their neighbour Debbie May to hear them through the thin walls. Debbie recalled Keith tormenting Ildiko by copying her voice in a high-pitched Punch and Judy style. He also insulted her appearance. On the 26th of October 2020, Ildiko showed Debbie a black eye and said that Keith had struck her. 5 days later, on the night before Halloween, Ildiko arrived at Debbie's doorstep wearing only a small nightdress and carrying a gin and tonic. She showed her bruises across her arms and legs, and again indicated that her husband was responsible. Despite what she had just revealed, Ildiko returned home at around 11:30 p.m. Approximately 90 minutes later, Keith telephoned their daughter. He repeatedly told her that he had ended her mother's life and said he could not take any more. He then called 999 and reported that the couple had fought and that Ildiko was no longer responding. Police and paramedics found her collapsed on the bed. She had suffered facial injuries and sustained pressure to both sides of her neck. Although emergency workers tried to save her, her time on this earth had already ended. Keith initially made blunt admissions at the house, but later claimed that Ildiko's death had been an accident, or that he had acted in self-defense. He said he had held her throat only briefly after she accused him of having an affair. The physical evidence did not support that account. Prosecutors argued that he had restrained her from behind for between 15 and 30 seconds. A jury found him guilty of murder, and in February 2022 he received a life sentence, with a minimum term of 14 years. The investigation then exposed another side of the former bus driver. 3 victims came forward describing serious maltreatment committed over several years, including offences against a girl who was not 18. Keith was subsequently convicted of 6 further offences and received an additional 9-year sentence. For years he had occupied a position associated with public trust, carrying countless people safely across London. The passengers could see the uniform and the man controlling the bus, but what they couldn't see was who he was when he went home. On the night of the 8th of January 2024, 21-year-old Anjun Nanoswaren travelled to Strawberry Hill Station in southwest London for what was supposed to be a small transaction. 10 pills were to be exchanged for £50. It was an insignificant amount of money, but before the night was over, it would escalate to an unbelievable level. Anjun arrived at around 11 p.m, approximately an hour after Dino Donaldson and 3 other men had reached the station. A disagreement began between the 2 groups. As the atmosphere became more aggressive, Anjun called his brother, who came to the station with 2 friends. The arrival of more people did not calm the situation. Donaldson became increasingly confrontational and produced a long, sharp implement from his waistband. The argument became a chase, forcing members of the group away from the platform and down onto the railway tracks. Donaldson managed to catch up with Anjun. Anjun was struck in the chest, abdomen and thigh. His brother immediately called 999 and began CPR beside the tracks, attempting to keep him alive until paramedics arrived. Despite those efforts, Anjun's time on this earth ended at the station. He was only 21. Donaldson fled through Twickenham towards Kingston upon Thames. CCTV allowed British Transport Police to follow his movements after he left Strawberry Hill, but the footage also captured something difficult to reconcile with what had just happened. Less than an hour after Anjun died, Donaldson boarded the N87 bus. The camera inside showed him smiling and laughing as he travelled away from the scene. A separate camera recorded his voice as he described the attack. Donaldson could be heard boasting, "I s***ed him fully," before explaining that he had felt the sharp implement enter Anjun's body. The recording gave investigators more than a route of escape. It captured Donaldson apparently describing the act in his own words, potentially an admissible confession. Back at Strawberry Hill, officers searched the area surrounding the tracks. A sharp implement and a black glove had been concealed in a tree near the station. Forensic examination found DNA belonging to both Donaldson and Anjun on the recovered items. The trail led police to Donaldson's home in West London 3 days later. When officers entered on the 11th of January, they discovered him hiding inside a cupboard. A search of his bedroom also uncovered 74 wraps of illicit substances, valued at more than £1,000. Donaldson refused to accept responsibility, but the CCTV, audio from the camera, and forensic evidence constructed a sequence that was difficult for him to escape from. In April 2026, following a 2-week trial at the Old Bailey, a jury unanimously found him guilty of Anjun's murder. He was remanded in custody to await sentencing. The case began with £50 and 10 tablets, yet the person lost that night had already built a life extending far beyond the station. Anjun was in his 3rd year at university, studying accounting and finance. His family said he was excited about his future. He was also an accomplished athlete who held a first Dan black belt in karate and had competed at both world and European championships. His physical ability could not protect him from a concealed weapon on the railway tracks. Within minutes, a minor dispute had removed a much-loved son and brother from his family. Thank you so much for watching. I'm uploading daily true crime and dark content here on this channel, so make sure that you're subscribed, hit like on the video, and also drop a comment so you get shown more of my stuff. Please do be careful out there, and I'll see you tomorrow.